faithfully conveying values and interpreting great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. In the last episode, we covered the history of the Low Countries, Part 1. Today, we'll cover Part 2. In Part 1, we discussed how, after breaking free from Habsburg rule, the Dutch Republic made big strides in economy, culture, science, and more, rising as a top European power. At the same time, the Low Countries, including the Netherlands, always faced serious outside crises, which eventually caused the Netherlands' decline. They slowly moved away from the heart of European politics and culture, and until the mid-20th century, when they bounced back as one of the most advanced economies. Now, I'll walk through this process, splitting it into two parts. Part 4, the tragedy of great power politics. Part 5, founding member of the EU and welfare state. All right, now let's dive into Part 4, the tragedy of great power politics, and I'll explore this issue. From its very birth, the Dutch Republic faced growing external threats.
What kind of threats?
In a nutshell, surrounded by big powers, the first rival was Spain. After the Dutch revolt, the Netherlands gained independence, but Belgium stayed under Habsburg control. Yet, that family never let go of the Netherlands, always scheming to take it back, leading to hidden conflicts. And this tangled with Europe's chaotic politics, sparking a major war. In 1618, with Spain and German Catholic princes under Habsburgs on one side, and England, France, and German Protestant princes on the other, tensions blew up into all-out fighting. The war dragged on for 30 years, known as the 30 Years' War. Naturally, the Netherlands sided with England and France against Spain. In the end, Spain lost, and the Habsburg plan to crush the Netherlands fell apart. Looking at the results, the Netherlands was clearly the winner. But the war hit Europe hard. Take Germany, the main battlefield. Over 80% of villages got wrecked. More than a third of people died. Economy tanked. Lives fell apart. The Netherlands got hit too, especially foreign trade, which was cut off by the war, causing huge losses. The sheer brutality of the war made people rethink things. In 1641, the Dutch thinker Hugo Grotius published On the Law of War and Peace, clearly saying both warring sides should follow basic ethics, like not starting unjust wars, not abusing prisoners, no massacring civilians, and so on. This became the root of modern international law. Sadly, ideals are one thing, but the Netherlands, sandwiched between major powers, was still in a precarious situation. And after Spain, the Netherlands encountered another formidable adversary. As mentioned earlier, Britain had close ties with the Low Countries. Flanders textile factories, for example, imported wool from Britain. During the 30 Years' War, Britain and the Netherlands even joined forces to defeat Spain. But in international politics, there are no permanent friends. As Britain's ambitions and power expanded, it began challenging Dutch dominance in international trade. In 1651, Britain enacted the Navigation Acts, stipulating that all goods imported to Britain must be transported by British ships.
In other words, whether you sourced goods from America, Asia, Africa, or mainland Europe, if you wanted to sell in Britain, you had to use British vessels.
Wasn't this blatantly trying to kick the Dutch out of international shipping? The Dutch refused to recognize the acts and sent warships to protect merchant vessels. Conflict was imminent. In 1652, Dutch and British navies clashed in the Strait of Dover.
The First Anglo-Dutch War erupted. British naval superiority blockaded the Strait of Dover, dealing a fatal blow to Dutch overseas trade. Their economy nearly collapsed, forcing Dutch acceptance of the Navigation Acts.
Next, Britain turned its attention to Dutch colonies. In 1664, British forces seized the Dutch-American colony New Netherland, renaming it New York and its capital, New Amsterdam, as New York City, erasing Dutch presence. Pushed beyond endurance, the Dutch declared war on Britain. The Second Anglo-Dutch War began. This time, the Dutch Navy excelled, blockading the Thames estuary. With Britain also fighting Spain, it conceded defeat. Britain then relaxed the Navigation Acts, while the Netherlands acknowledging its limitations, ceded American colonies to Britain. Ultimately, Britain gained advantage as Dutch international status declined. The subsequent Third Anglo-Dutch War ended in stalemate. In 1688, Britain's Glorious Revolution occurred. Bourgeois elites ousted King James II and invited his Dutch son-in-law, Stadtholder William, to become king. A Dutchman on the British throne finally settled conflicts, bringing nearly a century of peace to the Netherlands. It was during this period that Britain underwent the Industrial Revolution, dramatically increasing its national power. London, Liverpool, and Manchester replaced Antwerp and Amsterdam as Europe's manufacturing and economic hubs. The decline of the Low Countries became inevitable.
In 1776, when the American Revolutionary War broke out, Britain used Dutch aid to America as pretext to launch the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War. The Netherlands suffered a devastating defeat, exiting the ranks of European powers.
But this wasn't rock bottom yet, because another major power, France, was rising in the southwest. As mentioned before, the Western Low Countries originally belonged to the French king before switching allegiance to the Habsburg dynasty. However, French influence remained strong. For instance, in Wallonia bordering France, people spoke French and shared cultural customs with France. In the mid-15th century, after unifying, France began eyeing Wallonia. But with Spain to the front, Britain to the rear, plus the ever-vigilant Netherlands, France couldn't succeed. Things changed in the late 18th century. In 1789, the French Revolution erupted. The bourgeoisie abolished the monarchy and established the French First Republic, causing panic among counter-revolutionary forces across Europe. Britain, Austria, Prussia, the Netherlands, and others formed an anti-French coalition to crush the revolution. Yet, post-revolution France displayed astonishing combat power, pushing the coalition into retreat. By 1795, the French controlled all Low Countries. Belgium and Luxembourg were annexed into the French Republic and divided into 9 administrative departments. So, as for the Netherlands, the French installed a puppet regime for indirect rule. From then on, the Low Countries endured 20 years under French control. In 1804, Napoleon crowned himself emperor, transforming the Republic into the French Empire. Soon after, France formally annexed the Netherlands. Napoleon imposed heavy taxes and conscription throughout the Low Countries. Thus, in various campaigns like the French invasion of Russia, Battle of Leipzig, and Waterloo, soldiers from the Low Countries were seen everywhere. After Napoleon's defeat, the great powers convened the Congress of Vienna to redraw territorial boundaries. To contain France, the Netherlands and Belgium were merged into the United Kingdom of the Netherlands. William I, former Dutch stadtholder, became king, while Luxembourg was elevated to a Grand Duchy. William I also served as Grand Duke, thus unifying the Low Countries under the Vienna system, which provided stable international order. This stability allowed capitalists to absorb British Industrial Revolution achievements and drive industrialization. Especially Belgium, with its rich coal resources, quickly adopted steam engines on a large scale, dramatically boosting efficiency in its traditional strength, textiles. Luxembourg's steel industry also saw significant growth during this period. And meanwhile, the Low Countries heavily invested in railways, connecting key cities like Amsterdam, Brussels, and Antwerp, helping create a unified market and lower transaction costs. Though industrialization boosted development, internal divisions remained irreparable. Belgium and the Netherlands had major cultural, religious, and customary differences. Belgians resented Dutch kingship, especially with Dutch troops stationed there, seen as colonial oppression, fueling anger. What about Luxembourg? Traditionally leaning toward Germany, it also had little fondness for the Dutch. Their unity relied entirely on the Vienna system. Unsurprisingly, war became inevitable once the system collapsed. In 1830, France's July Revolution shifted its politics, creating a crack in the Vienna system. That August, Brussels citizens revolted, with all Belgium rising up, denouncing Dutch tyranny and demanding a constitutional monarchy like Britain's. What was the great power's stance? The Netherlands Kingdom existed to contain France, so France eagerly wanted its dissolution. Britain, with historical grudges against the Dutch, naturally sided against them. Belgium also showed strong pro-British leanings, winning further sympathy. Thus, through great power mediation, Belgium gained independence in 1831 as a constitutional monarchy. Luxembourg remained under Dutch kings until 1890, when it too became independent, finally parting ways. Coincidentally, that year, Dutch artist Vincent van Gogh committed suicide. Born in northern Netherlands, he wandered between Paris, Antwerp, Brussels, and Amsterdam. His life and art prove that despite political separation, the Low Countries remained culturally unified. Unfortunately, the mid-19th century brought another upheaval. Prussia unified fragmented German states into the German Empire. United Germany rapidly industrialized and colonized, clashing with established powers like Britain, France, and Russia. Both sides sought allies, forming the Allied powers led by Britain, France, Russia, and the Central Powers led by Germany, Austria, Hungary, by the early 20th century. The two blocs, the Allied powers led by Britain, France, and Russia, and the Central Powers led by Germany, Austria, and Hungary, were locked in covert and overt struggles. War clouds gathered over Europe. Where would the Low Countries go? Their choice was to remain neutral. Geographically, the Low Countries are sandwiched between France and Germany.
So joining either bloc would make them the first target when war broke out. Staying neutral was clearly wise.
But would their adversaries allow it? The answer was no. Germany's war plan required quick victory, and cutting through the Low Countries straight to Paris was the fastest route. The pre-war Schlieffen Plan concentrated forces on the right flank to smash through Luxembourg and Belgium, capture Paris, and force France's surrender. Britain and France knew this well. Declaring any German invasion of the Low Countries meant total war. 1914, June. World War I erupts. August 2nd, German troops enter Luxembourg. August 3rd, Germany declares war on France and invades Belgium. Britain, citing Germany's violation of neutral nations, joined the war. Belgian forces resisted fiercely with Anglo-French support. Though most territory fell, they held the Franco-Belgian border, slowing Germany's advance and shattering its blitzkrieg dream. For this contribution, at the Paris Peace Conference, the Allies transferred Germany's African colonies, Rwanda and Burundi, to Belgium. But peace was short-lived. In 1933, Nazis rose to power. Germany resurged, annexing Austria and Czechoslovakia. Traumatized by WWN, Britain and France pursued appeasement, retreating step by step. In September 1939, Germany blitzed Poland, igniting World War II. Britain and France declared war, but stayed passive, letting Poland fall, giving Germany time to strike elsewhere. On May 10, 1940, Germany simultaneously invaded France, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. That day, Luxembourg's Grand Duke fled. 3 days later, the Dutch king escaped to Britain. Belgium held until late May, buying time for the Allied Dunkirk evacuation. King Leopold III then ordered surrender. He remained under Nazi house arrest for 4 years. In June 1944, the Allies landed in Normandy. Nazi Germany's fall became inevitable. By year's end, the Low Countries were liberated. To summarize, from the early 17th to mid-20th century, the Low Countries were squeezed by successive great powers, Spain, Britain, France, Germany, drastically limiting their development space and weakening their power, thus declining from European powers to ordinary nations. Since World War II's end, they finally enjoyed prolonged peace and stability. My narrative now moves to Part 5, Founding Members of the EU and Welfare States. Post-war, the Low Countries pursued European integration externally and high welfare policies internally. Now, first, European integration. World War II's bitter lessons taught European nations that only through cooperation could they avoid repeating history. This was especially vital for small nations like Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg, sandwiched between giants. Shared interests drove their politicians to champion European unity. As World War II neared its end, Benelux signed a customs agreement in London, pledging to eliminate tariffs and promote commercial and financial freedom. In 1948, the three nations signed the Benelux Treaty, forming an economic union. Thereafter, industrial policies, monetary policies, and more were decided jointly. Building on Benelux, the Low Countries joined France, West Germany, and Italy to establish the European Coal and Steel Community. This later evolved into the European Economic Community. In 1993, it transformed into the European Union. Today's EU has 27 members, with Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg as founding states. Key institutions are hosted across them. MO1, 8 new European Parliament, European Commission and Council in Belgium, European Court of Justice and Court of Auditors in Luxembourg, UN's International Court of Justice in The Hague, Netherlands. Belgium and Netherlands also co-founded NATO. When France left NATO in 1966, its headquarters moved from Paris to Brussels. Now, about colonial situations. During World War I, Japan seized Dutch colonies in Southeast Asia. Post-war, Dutch attempts to regain control faced fierce Southeast Asian resistance. In August 1945, Indonesia declared independence. Dutch military suppression sparked a decade-long conflict against determined Indonesian resistance. Quote, in 1954, the Netherlands finally recognized Indonesia's independence. Belgium's African colonies, Rwanda, Burundi, and Belgian Congo, gained independence in the 1960s, ending the Low Countries' colonial era. During the 1960s, the Low Countries focused on boosting welfare. Belgium and Luxembourg built comprehensive social security systems, providing high-quality benefits in education, employment, maternity, healthcare, housing, and pensions. This was closely tied to the Low Countries' socialist traditions. As mentioned earlier, centuries of industrial prosperity nurtured a strong working class and socialist parties. From the mid-19th century, workers organized to demand shorter hours, better pay, and improved conditions from capitalists. Brussels, Belgium's capital, became a hub for socialists worldwide. For example, Marx lived there in exile from 1845 to 1848, completing the Communist Manifesto in Brussels. The Second International Development, founded in 1889, first headquartered in Brussels before moving to Amsterdam. But unlike Russian Bolsheviks, Low Countries' socialist parties rejected violent revolution, opting for reform instead. Thus, no revolutions erupted in the Low Countries. Post-104, socialist parties joined others in pushing welfare reforms. Take the Netherlands. Its 2017 budget allocated €785 billion to social security and employment, €754 billion to healthcare, and €338 billion to education, culture, and science. 71% of total €264.4 billion spending. This high ratio made Benelux nations welfare state models. The welfare states faced problems: heavy government burdens, reduced market vitality, and economic slowdown.
From 1975 to 1994, Dutch unemployment doubled, while Belgium's rate soared.
The Netherlands pioneered reforms through collective wage cuts to ease state burdens. This restored the economy without triggering mass poverty or protests. This is called the Dutch miracle. Belgium followed suit soon after, also climbing out of the slump. Entering the 21st century, the Low Countries maintained strong growth momentum, especially the Netherlands, which leveraged its high-tech edge to become a widely acclaimed tech powerhouse. And the Netherlands brought up on no profits. For example, Philips holds high market shares in areas like electric shavers, LCD TVs, and air purifiers. Of course, what the Dutch are most proud of is their sea dike technology. Half of the Netherlands' land is below sea level, with major cities like Rotterdam and Amsterdam sitting below sea level. So, since ancient times, the Dutch have battled wits with the ocean. mastering the art of building dikes. On one hand, they use dikes to fend off seawater. On the other, they reclaim land from the sea to expand territory. In 1956, the Dutch government launched the Delta Works, taking over 40 years to build the world's largest and most complex sea dike system. The Dutch have also exported this technology abroad. With global climate change accelerating, sea levels rising, and coastal cities worldwide plagued by hurricanes and extreme weather, what to do? Well, building dikes is a solid solution. So cities like Venice, New York, London, and St. Petersburg are all racing to invite the Dutch to plan sea defenses. In clean energy, the Netherlands is also a global leader. Being coastal and constantly swept by sea winds, it boasts abundant hydro and wind power. The Dutch have fully tapped this natural advantage to vigorously develop clean energy. In 2017, the Dutch government announced that all domestic trains were powered entirely by wind energy. Royal Dutch Shell, the global energy giant, co-owned by the Netherlands and the UK, also invested early in hydrogen fuel research and use. This transformed it from a high-energy oil company criticized by environmental groups into a widely praised green enterprise. As low-carbon environmentalism becomes a global consensus, the Netherlands, mastering core technologies, is poised for major achievements. Of course, no society is perfect, and the Low Countries face their own social issues. For instance, in 1976, the Netherlands categorized drugs into soft and hard types, allowing legal possession of soft drugs under specific conditions. The Dutch government believes that relaxing controls on soft drugs can steer people away from harder, more lethal drugs like heroin and meth. This is called choosing the lesser of two evils. But as a result, addicts from across Europe flooded into Amsterdam, threatening local security.
How?
In Belgium, Dutch and English dominate in northern Flanders, while French prevails in southern Wallonia. Historic and cultural differences breed mutual resentment and frequent friction between regions. Thank you. Why does Belgium's men's football team often have internal conflicts? The reason is players from different regions simply don't get along. So during major tournaments, Belgium's team often underperforms, squandering their strong potential. Still, these social issues aren't crippling. Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg remain among the world's most developed economies. All right, that concludes our history of the Low Countries. Study notes are below the audio. See you next time.